It's time, everyone, for Deep Dive Zone, a Sonic review series for fans of all shapes and sizes. And guys, today is our final episode of the classic Sonic era, and the final episode of the first leg of Archie Sonic. We're gonna do a discussion episode after, I suppose, but this is our last proper coverage of material.
Ooh.
And, I think we're ending on about as fitting a note as we possibly could be, because we have here a Sonic Super Special and the final three Knuckles comics.
It's really the Archie comics, just in a nutshell. Specials and Knuckles.
And ending on an absolute wet fart. We keep saying wet
yes.
fart, which is like, it feels gross at a certain point, like, can we just find a new term? But what else could I call this? Come
It's a
on.
solid description.
There are plenty of other things you could call this, just like a low note or
A brown note if we want to keep with the butthole theming.
God.
No, this is a bad idea. We have here the King of the Hill arc of the Knuckles comics, which is... We didn't
what
watch
now?
those episodes of King of the Hill, sadly, but...
Not yet.
I guess we could if we really wanted to, but I don't particularly feel like it.
That would just be a really stupid bonus episode idea anyway.
Might still do it, but
Eh.
these are notable, actually, for being some of the only comics that Ken Penders considers to be bad comics.
yeah, that really got my expectations up, but sadly, these are actually fairly unremarkable.
They are
I
just
think-
par for the course.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem, is they're completely unremarkable, and that's what makes them a wet fart.
Stop that. I'm banning that term.
Low note. Let's go with
Yes,
low note instead.
it is a low note, I suppose, but I mean,
think
what am I
I
saying?
think
Oh,
it
yeah.
says a lot
I mean,
about...
It's funny that all the absolute incomprehensible, nonsensical, and really, what's the word, insensitive
Yeah.
issues he has no problem with, but then he calls this bad when there's nothing real. I mean, there's minor things that are kind of characteristic of the entire series, maybe.
But it's not particularly offensive.
Yeah.
It's just boring, I think is a good way to put it.
Well, and this is what I think says a lot about Penders, is that, this is clearly not meant to be the last Knuckles arc.
No.
Both because it doesn't feel like a finale at all, and because they essentially started just shoving Knuckles' backup stories into regular Sonic issues to continue all of the Knuckles plotlines.
Yeah.
And it makes me think that this is the same deal as the Sally miniseries, where Ken considers these bad comics the same way he does some of the Sally comics, because they were the ones where it didn't make money and got canceled.
Maybe?
That probably is the reason.
That
I was
would make
wondering if there was
sense, I
anything
guess.
else. But let's actually talk about it rather than broad strokes.
Instead
Indeed.
of just complain about the entire thing.
Indeed. This story starts with Bad to the Bone, written and drawn by Ken Penders. We're at the point where he's drawing all the issues himself, because I think they weren't paying artists to do it for him. Trouble is in store for Knuckles as he hunts down a gunman supposedly terrorizing Angel Island wildlife, but he's interrupted by his childhood bully, a gorilla named Monk.
I find it funny that they say, who is Monk and how is he connected to Knuckles' past on the cover, similar to what they did with Nate Morgan, actually, but much less warranted, I think.
Yeah,
Well, because
he's nothing
Nate-
important, really.
Well, Nate has a significant backstory.
Well, yeah,
Monk,
Nate
the
does.
answer is right here. He's just some jerk.
He's an asshole. That's literally his entire personality.
Yeah, and something spoilery that I'm not going to actually say happens at the end that makes it seem all pointless, too.
It already feels a little pointless. It's just weird. We start off with this new human guy, like, sexily putting a gun together and shooting a bird.
It does look like he's kissing it in one
You
of
know,
those drawings.
I didn't see it that way, but I guess you're right. He's very fond of his weapon.
I didn't see it that way either, but there's on the first page at the in the bottom corner. I assume it's not supposed to be him kissing his gun, but god damn it, that's what it looks like.
No, I think that is what it's supposed to be.
Is it? Okay, so he's that kind of guy. Huh.
In any case, yes, but we have this guy, and then we have this other guy who is a purple gorilla man who is very large and just he just looks gross. I don't like his design at all.
He looks like a character from a completely different comic. I don't know what comic, though.
Not a good one.
I will say, at least, although I didn't expect Angel Island to float so low that you could reach it, the fact that he does lasso onto the floating island, just climb up, is actually kind of cool.
That's fair.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
It's about the only cool thing he does. Other times he just yells and is angry at Knuckles.
Oh yeah, no, he's not.
Yeah.
He's not anything special as a character.
Frankly, special is how I describe a lot of this stuff. We cut to Knuckles reading 2001: A Space Odyssey.
So, I looked at the picture before I read the text on here and was wondering, that spacesuit looks a lot like the ones from 2001: A Space Odyssey. Then realized that's because Knuckles is reading it. Also, why does Locke have a copy of 2001?
It must have somehow survived. I don't know.
I guess.
Although, the thing is, it's not actually 2001. This is actually New Echidna lore. What the heck? Because apparently, they just really, really want to sell the fact that Echidna Society did renounce technology, even though they didn't. Because apparently, they used to be even more advanced and travel in space. But they decided, nah.
Yeah, I don't know what this is supposed to be. Is he reading actual 2001 and assuming that it's a real history book about echidnas,
that's what I thought it was.
Or is he reading a fictionalized version of 2001 that happens to have been made by echidnas? Or is this a real history book and 2001 actually is canon to Sonic the Hedgehog?
It's really hard to say.
So I assume Knuckles is just reading 2001: A Space Odyssey, because in the bottom it even says you can barely read it, but it does say by Clark.
Hear me
But
out.
is this a fictionalized echidna version of Arthur C. Clarke?
Okay. Oh my God. Well,
we already saw this with Jack Kirby. You can't assume anything.
Okay, but I don't care.
Locke does copy editing for Arthur C. Clarke. No, okay.
So there are a few possibilities here. The two most likely scenarios, I think, are one, that 2001, the book, survived, and the echidnas were inspired by it to go into space. And then they recreated the story, sort of. Or,
Crazy
two,
everything?
echidnas just went into space, but then they also found this book, and then they decided to rewrite it as an embellished history book with some extra flair, kind of a thing. So it's like, it's based on a true story, but it's very much not 100%
Propaganda?
Sure.
It's like heavily editorial. I don't know. It's silly. Rama's better anyway. No.
Ooh, that's one hell of a take.
Okay. Do you guys think I've actually read these books? I just know that Arthur C. Clarke is famous. Don't worry about it.
I've read both books.
Listen, I only read comic books about
Well,
teenage...
excuse me, I've never read 2001, but I have read Rama.
Alright, well, in any case, here's Catweasel.
Yeah.
Little Catweasel.
Yeah, like, I wasn't expecting him to come back again.
Yeah, like, most of the Echidnaopolis cast is just not even present, even since last episode, because they weren't in that one either.
Yeah, because Knuckles seems to be avoiding Echidnaopolis for whatever reason.
He's tired of all that nonsense. I don't blame him.
Actually, yeah, not for whatever reason. He does actually give a reason.
Yeah. So, Catweasel asks Knuckles to take out the sexy gunman because the bird that he shot in the first opening spread was his friend, I guess?
Yeah.
But on our way there, we don't quite get to the gunman because Knuckles just gets pelted in the face with a fucking rock.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's Monk, Knuckles' childhood bully, who is anger.
My only thought learning about all this backstory was, why should I give a fuck about him?
I don't know what you're supposed to think about this guy, because on the one hand, he was Knuckles' childhood bully and still hates him now. On the other hand, because he was Knuckles' childhood bully, one night the Brotherhood of Guardians kidnapped him and threw him off the island?
That's pretty funny.
That is ridiculous. Like,
That's
what the
hilarious.
heck? At the time of reading this, I assumed that, we'll learn more about how Monk is actually, an in-depth and evil character, and that's why the Brotherhood threw him off the island. Spoilers, no.
No,
But
he's just an asshole.
yeah, this is such. Even for the Brotherhood, this caught me off guard.
I
Yeah,
guess he
they
just harassed Knuckles too much.
they almost killed a child.
It's fine.
They
He deserved
intended
it.
to.
So, and it makes me wonder, was he thinking about Knuckles the entire time? Has he been trying to get back to Angel Island for years just to keep screwing with Nux?
Well,
Oh,
he doesn't have access to like planes and stuff, so he's just waiting until it happened to be close enough, and he was able to. He probably tried to lasso it several times and just missed. He's like, "Ah, darn it!"
It's possible. So yeah, he and Knuckles wrestle a bunch, but then they finally get interrupted by Gun Guy.
Yeah, you kind of gloss over the wrestling, which is fair, but I like how Knuckles clearly doesn't know a thing about negotiating because he punches Monk in the face and then proceeds to be like, "Hey, you know what? We can just talk." And then obviously Monk is like, "No."
Yeah. Well, and it leads to this whole scene. I think they're like rolling down a hill as they're fighting, but like the motion blur Photoshop effect over Penders's weird art with Knuckles' extremely long face and like head tentacles.
It's a weirdly drawn sequence for sure.
it's a
Yeah.
very strangely drawn sequence.
And it's weird because out of Penders's drawings, these are some of the last ones that are like acceptable looking. These issues, that is.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that I never thought this. I didn't think that these issues looked all that bad or even noticeably Pendersy.
Yeah,
Some of it is a little kind of face melting.
there are
Yeah,
always a few
it's
things.
there's good and bad to it, but like it's gonna get much worse from here on out. Mostly just because this is the last time when he draws anyone's legs and arms not looking really creepy.
Oh,
But
good.
yeah, and we're continuing the trend of these last Knuckles issues having backup stories, and you can really feel how bad that is because what did we get accomplished in this first story? Knuckles learns the problem, he fights a guy, and then he finds the guy, and that's it.
Knuckles commits assault. That's about it.
Yeah, this whole arc, all three issues, the main stories, could easily have fit in one issue without a backup story.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
honestly.
the same goes for these backup stories, which, in fairness, at least they're starring Espio right now, which I am not opposed to.
Yeah, that is neat.
Because here we have Hiding in Plain Sight, written by Penders and drawn by Colleen Doran. While Julie Sue is looking for Knuckles, she and Espio run into the roboticized Valdez, attacking the other chameleons.
That's right. Valdez was not actually forgotten. I knew they
Right.
wouldn't just drop a plot line like that.
Sadly, I don't have a lot to say about this, because, it's like I said, they run into Valdez, but that's the very end of the story. I pretty much
Yeah.
got the whole thing in one shot. The only thing that I can really say we have for this story is that we see other chameleons, which we have not really interacted with much.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's anything more to say unless.
Oh, and the stolen bird horse thing from Thundar the Barbarian is back.
Oh, yeah.
Right, the Pasha, as they call it. Yeah, it basically all the chameleons have been getting roughed up by Valdez and their SWAT-bot goons. At least they neatly justify why we haven't seen them because they literally just hide and apparently don't like interacting with others that much.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's literally just intro, similar to the
Yeah.
main story.
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and continue to Knuckles number 31. We're just flying through these. I want, we've talked about Penders' gun politics in the past, and again, not necessarily like being a big gun lover myself, but I just love that this cover. How do we communicate the message? Oh, let's put a big no sign over the man's gun.
Yeah, that is so weird. They've had guns on covers before.
Yeah.
And they didn't do that.
Yeah. This is The Thrill of the Hunt, written and drawn by Ken Penders, as usual. The gunman reveals himself to Knuckles and Monk as Hunter, because of course he does, and threatens Knuckles into letting him hunt them for sport, complete with shock collars to keep them within a certain area. So yes, it's the most dangerous game.
Yes, it is.
You just can't escape either the very direct parodies or the clear inspiration stories.
Yeah.
So they're trying to spy on Knuckles, which I guess would be helpful in this instance. But most of the time, it's just creepy. But they
Yeah.
can't because the plot is blocking them.
Plot. nuts.
Yeah, there's no explanation for why this is happening. I don't think it's
Yeah.
Hunter.
They don't ever actually say. I thought it was supposed to be, but
I mean,
maybe it was gonna have been explained in the next arc that never happened.
Well, the next arc did happen, it's just that they tied it into the Sonic Adventure crap.
But since it wasn't a Knuckles comic, maybe they just didn't do that detail because they thought it was too minor, and they needed to stuff the stories in Sonic comics and didn't have as much space anymore. Not that
It's
they ever
possible.
used their space very well.
mm,
As for what's actually happening in, like, the story, we basically have, Monk is on top of Knuckles, and this new guy tases him, I guess, stuns him, and has this weird Shadow Man bodyguard carrying to a ship or something.
He's just got a helper robot that shows up here and not again for the entire story.
is it a robot?
It doesn't say what he is. He says, "This is my manservant, RU-12." And he says a very unique creature, which implies to me that he's not a robot, but I have no idea what he is.
Maybe you're right. Well, they don't explain it, so
Yeah. And yeah, no, he takes Knuckles onto his ship and is like, "Hey, can I hunt you for sport?" um, he shows him his trophy collection. I want to admire that he apparently killed and mounted the head of a hedgehog.
among
Yeah,
others. Yeah.
I
I
have
never
to
did
agree
learn
with
what happened to
Knuckles.
Chuck's son.
Oof.
Oh
I
no.
have to agree with Knuckles when he says this is the sickest thing he's ever seen.
Yeah, no, this guy is not a good guy, obviously.
God, no.
But it's funny because Knuckles is like, you monster, obviously. And then he's like, monster? You think I kill in cold blood? Nah, I only hunt on fair terms. Says the guy who literally shot Snow Pigeon in his intro, just randomly.
And also, hunting on fair terms does not preclude you from killing in cold blood.
I'm
Right.
saying that even he doesn't even follow his own supposed code of conduct. But yeah,
Yeah.
obviously his code is screwed up.
Well, and it's like, he says, "Oh, I'm doing it fairly," but his way to get Knuckles to agree to be hunted is to say, "Anyway, I could kill your girlfriend. Do you want that?
Right, that's how he threatens Knuckles.
I'll
Which he
kill
never
your girlfriend with my
actually.
incredibly tiny gun that I'm holding in two hands."
It's weird because I will accept that he could get Knuckles because he literally ambushed him when Monk was beating him up.
Right.
Fine. But he doesn't actually explain how he would kill Julie Sue. I don't think he would necessarily be able to easily get the jump on her.
Well,
It's
yeah,
not like
because
she's hostage.
the implication here is that Knuckles has to agree to this because if he were not under threat of Julie Sue being hurt, that, he could probably just take this guy in a fight really easily.
Sure.
But everything I've seen suggests that Julie Sue could also probably take this guy in a fight.
Yeah, yeah.
Probably.
But, no, they agree to it. Or, well, Knuckles agrees to it. Monk just kind of ends up there. He doesn't really have a choice.
Yeah, Monk's like unconscious. He's just being forced into this.
Yeah.
And they have shock collars on.
Yeah, Monk immediately is like, I'm not doing this, and that's the reason he has to play along.
Yeah, and it hurts both of them if either of them get too far from the other, which is annoying.
It's not a good deal, obviously.
I'll tell you what they should have done. They should have had Hunter ambush them by putting the collars on them and then just cut to this scene. Like, you don't get to have the whole explanation. You don't need that.
Just cut out this entire issue.
I mean,
You could do that on like the first page of the next one.
Well, because that's why we were
all that
saying
he
that.
does in this issue is just
Yeah, but that's why we were
persuade him.
saying that you could make this one comic. It's all just
yeah, it's stretched out way too much.
no. It's okay because we get the epic gun bro in his cool space marine armor. I don't know what this is.
I mean, if this guy wasn't just a parody, I would wonder if this is another character from like the Lost Ones or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it totally could be. And frankly, if that comic had continued, I wouldn't be surprised if Penders had put this guy in it, because Penders never brings this guy back. But, well, it's like, I don't know how this guy connects to the rest of the Overlanders, because aren't all of the regular humans supposed to not be here, except for, like, Nate and Robotnik and Snively?
They still haven't explained that, so I don't really know. I can't say. You could say better than me.
Well, I know where the humans are, I just don't know why this guy isn't with them. Well, one day we will never find out. So let's go ahead and continue. To the best of friends, Penders and Doran. The roboticized Valdez captures SBO, roboticizes his friend Lisa, and threatens to do the same to every other chameleon from Rainbow Valley if SBO doesn't reveal everything he knows about Knuckles, the Guardians, and the Chaos Emeralds.
I mean, to be fair, that's not a whole lot.
True.
SBO is not an intelligence guy. I mean,
He really-
I guess in the modern series he would be, but he's not right now.
Yeah, they chose the wrong guy. You should have grabbed Julie Sue.
She's too caught up in being unknowingly threatened.
The thing is,
There.
this kind of makes sense, actually, because they actually turn Robo Valdez into a character which I did not expect and I appreciate immensely. Instead of just being like, oh, you will comply or whatever. No. He actually has a personality. And he remembers what happened when he wasn't a robot, but it's in a twisted way. He recounts all the events, and then he's like, of the invasion of Mobatropolis. And then he's like, oh, my friends abandoned me, which I didn't realize that he actually stayed behind in issue 75. I had to go back and check. So they actually planted that seed in advance.
Oh, did they actually? They actually did?
Yeah,
Oh.
but he stayed behind of his own will.
Yeah.
Even though Robo Valdez doesn't say that.
Fair
And then he's like, oh, and then a kind doctor came and fixed me up.
Ah, yes, a kind doctor.
And then he's like, oh, yes, I have to get the Chaos Emerald to save the planet from the evil King Acorn. But then Valdez still kind of obviously has their memories and stuff. So they think, oh, well, I know about my chameleon people. I know Espio. I know. He would probably know, that Espio has been with the rest of the Chaotix. And since he knows Espio, that would be a logical first lead.
Okay, yeah, you've convinced me. You've reasoned it out, I suppose. I do think that in a lot of ways, I think that making roboticized characters be dark reflections of their normal selves is a good decision. I don't like the inconsistency because it doesn't square up with the you're not in control of your actions, but you are conscious of everything that's happening.
There is a scene with Eggman rewiring Valdez.
Well, the thing is that I'm trying to remember because, with all of the Robians freed, we're not going to be seeing a lot of newly created Robians for the remainder of this comic, but the ones that are relevant mostly retain this trait, which, could mean that he does the same thing for all of them. But I didn't notice that it said that he changed things, so it's not necessarily an inconsistency. So I suppose it works, and I think that narratively it is more interesting to do that. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It makes more sense also from a standpoint of Eggman is very much, he doesn't seem like the roboticizing type, or mass roboticizing type. He seems much more like he's going to build his army and then use roboticized Mobians as military leaders.
I think that's it. Eggman has a different take than Robotnik, whereas Robotnik, like the whole, there'll be an army of mindless slaves.
Right.
Eggman is more like Eggman and sort of wants a personality to their minions.
And that fits very much with Eggman.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's managed to make this story seem much more interesting than it actually is, frankly. Because it's like, we get that whole story, and then Liza, whatever, the pink chameleon girl we just met last time gets roboticized, and the art is breaking down. The faces are starting to look really weird.
Espio's face right at the end here looks like a pug.
Yeah.
I don't always harping on the art, because sometimes the story's good enough that mediocre art can be carried by the story, but we shouldn't have had to just explain all of that to make this story more interesting.
It's not surface level enjoyment. You have to read into it.
You have to read into it, exactly.
Sure. Isn't that often what the Knuckles comics are, though?
Yeah, to an extent.
Well, hey, it's 1 out of 4. Well, let's see if it becomes maybe even it could be as many as 3 out of 6 by the end of Knuckles number 32 here. Probably not, though. This is our last issue of the Knuckles comics. Doesn't it feel like an extreme climax, everybody?
Okay, it wasn't supposed to be the last issue.
I know.
Right.
I'm being facetious, but it's like even the last issue of Sonic Boom, which also got canceled, was a better ending to that. And I don't know. I like Knuckles' face. I like the way Gallon draws the cover.
I've liked the covers, honestly.
Oh, the covers are pretty solid.
They know how to sell you a comic book, at least.
Yeah.
This is To the Death, written and drawn by Ken Penders. The hunt begins as Knuckles and Monk struggle to ward Hunter off in Angel Island's, oh god, underwater cave system of a city-like place.
You mean Hydrocity?
Yeah, so I guess if we just jump right to that. Yeah, they brought in Hydrocity, whatever you want to call it. I am very pleased by this. This instantly makes this arc better for me because there was a bit where they pretended like this was the Angel Island from the games, where there was like a map and
Right.
it was the Enerjack arc, I think, where they're like, oh yeah, here's Ice Cap and Hydrocity, and all the rest. But I was like, no, those are never ever going to show up. But then they actually bring it in, so that I'm happy. That's cool, and they explain it a little bit too, and give it some context. You know, like, oh, it's an old abandoned city, I guess. I mean, they don't go into it a whole lot, but I'll say it was always weird to me why that place was on Angel Island in the games. It seemed kind of strange compared to a lot of the other zones.
I'll say this, it doesn't look like it does in Sonic 3, though.
I'm giving credit where credit is due. Honestly, it's fine, I think. I mean,
They
no,
could have
it's
just
not
made it purple,
wholly
at least.
consistent.
The way it's explained, this design does make more sense.
Yeah. I was like, oh, well, what about the first 2 pages? What do we have to say about... No, there's nothing there. It's just, they're just running away, and he's hunting them, and there's way too much dialogue.
Ooh, yeah.
So, at first, when Knuckles and Monk are just jumping around being annoyed with each other, I agree. It's nothing crazy. But I actually kind of like the bits where Hunter, also, why is that his name? Give him an actual name, is tracking them. I kind of like all his overly in-depth thoughts.
I suppose you can tell that he's passionate about his work. Although not that passionate about the spoils, because Locke and Archimedes sneak onto Hunter's ship, but there's a bomb in it. It's booby-trapped.
Oh no.
What was Hunter's plan if he just set his ship to explode?
You strand yourself on Angel Island.
I guess.
I'm sure the Echidnas will be nice and happy to let him stick around.
Definitely.
They should have had a gunfight between this guy and Remington or something.
That would have honestly been more interesting than what we actually got.
Maybe just because this is more interesting than the previous 2 issues by a large margin. But I thought they were trying, and I'll give them some credit.
There is at least danger.
Yeah. Well,
And,
because we're actually getting an actual chase now, because, let's be honest, we didn't really have much of a chase the last issue.
No.
Yeah, no, and the idea of a Sonic character having to fight smart because they're being hunted by a sniper is kind of cool. It's just that they don't really end up fighting that smart. They just kind of fall onto him. Like, they don't even really work together. He just kind of flings Monk at him.
Well, the problem is that Knuckles is trying to be smart, which he can be in these sometimes, when he's not trying to negotiate by punching people in the face. But Monk is still angry from that, and is not having any of it. And yes, it just throws himself at the guy, and then it just gets reduced to standard. Well, plus, at the end, instead of doing anything clever or, with fast reflexes or whatever, Knuckles just uses his stupid emerald powers to save the day.
Yes, this is extremely frustrating. The shock collars are going crazy through all this as he's trying to beat on Hunter. But then the collar just snaps and Knuckles just releases a giant burst of chaos energy and Deus Ex Machinas the plot away. And then Locke and Archimedes arrive just in time to accomplish nothing.
Made me realize that Locke's subplot was literally pointless. If you took that out, it would have been really easy to fit in a single issue. Yeah, I'm not a fan of this at all. It's a low note. That's for sure.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Is Monk dead?
Yes!
Yeah. I forgot to mention that because who cares?
Yeah, we don't give a shit about him, but
Yeah, the collar goes off, he falls backward off the railing and dies just on the floor.
And then Knuckles acts like he cares.
Well, yeah, he leans over him looking all sad. It's like, that guy was a dick, but
he was an asshole to you, Knuckles. Your grandparents and dad literally threw him off the island because he was an asshole.
Okay, well, I'm not excusing
Knuckles
that.
doesn't know that, I don't think.
I know, but he terrorized you and then suddenly disappeared, and now he's back to trying to terrorize you, yet you're sad that he's dead.
Well, it'd be one thing if like they made up at any point, but
Which
it's
they
like
didn't.
this guy was a jerk until the day he died, and he died
Yeah.
because he was a jerk.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get that. Although, yeah, I did give them some credit. The action, a lot of it is a little hard to understand. It's weird because they rushed the end with a sudden conclusion, even though they had plenty of time.
And the ending is just nothing. They just put him in a big glass ball underwater.
And I'm assuming we'll never see him again.
Penders never brings this guy back.
Yeah, that's about what I expected.
Doesn't mean this guy never comes back, though. Anyway, yeah, so I get, obviously, this guy was, like, horrendous, bad person, but this is still surprising coming from Knuckles, when Locke is like, oh, this guy is quite resilient. We could just freeze him, and that's kind of more humane, I think is the
Right.
implication. But then Knuckles is like, no, 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 no. As long as this guy isn't, like, trying to starve himself or whatever, and he can still be alive in there, let him rot away for all that he's done. Because this guy killed Monk, who was my best friend, as we saw.
No, and Snow Pigeon, who was the girlfriend of a bird that I hate.
Who was literally introduced in the scene they died in. Plenty of build-up there.
Well, that's the theme of this arc, is stuff being destroyed in the very instant that it's introduced. Monk shows up in one issue and dies 2 issues later. Hunter shows up in 1 issue and is written out of the story 2 issues later. Snow Pigeon shows up on the same page that they die. Yeah.
Yeah.
And frankly, that's continued on into the backup story with the worst of enemies, which is Penders and Doran, wherein, forced into leading Valdez's team to the Chaos Chamber, SBO misdirects the Robian to the sewers beneath Echidnaopolis. And in this comic, SBO has to kill his friend because stupid.
Okay, first of all, let's not jump straight to that. Not that there isn't much to talk about. But before we get there, SBO is supposed to be being clever here or something, but again, the writers are very bad, I think, at communicating that, because I don't understand what SBO is trying to do. He's just like, oh, I gotta be careful, and then suddenly opens a trap door, and that's how he does his thing.
Yeah, so he
Yeah.
leads them into a tunnel sewer, which I assume is not the way to the Chaos Chamber, but he just happens to know that there is a trap door here for it to fall through, and then he wrestles Robo Valdez into the water.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
it's weird, because I started reading this, and Valdez is like, keeps saying, oh, I'm watching your every move, SBO. And he's like, I gotta be careful. And then there's even a bit where, like, SBO and Lisa talk in robot speech and about something, but it never comes up whatever they were talking about. I thought they were gonna pull a fast one on SBO or something. Yeah, but then just falls through a trapdoor. SBO grabs him, throws him in the water. Like, yeah, great. I'm glad we had all the build up for that.
And the thing that gets me about all this is that SBO just killed a man. Like, you know that roboticization, people can be freed from it. But this is the guy that in the Girls' Rule special, Hershey said something like, I'd rather have seen him dead than roboticized. What is this death is preferable to roboticization shit?
Yes, so SBO kills him too. So you're right, that is a little weird, and certainly I could never see Sonic doing this. But SBO is their own character, and I mean, they kind of write him however they want to, and that's fine, as long as it's not anything crazy outlandish. I think it's fine if they write him as seeing that Valdez is threatening all of his friends, and the Robians have been newly re-enslaved by a new Robotnik. Eggman has come, and so there's no obvious way to solve this. I think that's a reasonable course of action and believable for the nothing really we know about SBO.
Well, that's exactly it, is that if you wanted to say that he's the kind of guy who has to make a tough decision sometime, I could buy that if we had ever seen that as part of his character at all.
Well, he never really gotten much with. Yeah, no, that's what they're doing here.
I suppose. Well, that's it. The Knuckles comics end not with a bang, but with a whimper. Pretty much the only way they could.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, the main story really isn't much at all. It's weird because the Knuckles comics have kind of been on and off. They jump around between different things, but usually it tracks back to some main plot point. You know, the Dark Legion is up to no good again, or some other ancient echidna that's related to someone from the past is showing up, or, you know, the dingoes are causing a ruckus or whatever. But this time is not at all related to anything. I guess Knuckles is just running away from all that, so that's fair. But it's weird because it happens to be the final arc, and yet it has almost nothing to do with anything we've seen.
Listen, to be fair, you have to have a very high IQ to understand Ken Pender's comics.
Okay, alright.
The imagery is extremely subtle, and without a solid grasp of theoretical physics, most of the themes will go over a typical reader's head. There's also Locke's nihilistic outlook, which is deeply woven into his characterization. His personal philosophy draws heavily from Nadonia Voya literature, for instance. The fans understand this stuff. They have the intellectual capacity to truly appreciate the depth of these stories, to realize that they're not just exciting, they say something deep about life. As a consequence, people who dislike Pender's comics truly are idiots. Of course they wouldn't appreciate, for instance, the horror in Dimitri's existential catchphrase, "Reason had its day, brother," which is itself a cryptic reference to Turgenev's Russian epic, Fathers and Sons. I'm smirking right now, just imagining one of those addlepated simpletons scratching their heads in confusion as Ken's genius unfolds itself on their book pages. What fools. How I pity them. And yes, by the way, I do have a Brotherhood of Guardians tattoo. And no, you cannot see it. It's for the ladies' eyes only. And even they have to demonstrate that they're within 5 IQ points of my own, preferably lower, beforehand.
That still didn't explain how Monk and Hunter are significant to anything.
Let's move on, everybody, to a Sonic the Hedgehog super special, where I'm sure nothing silly will happen. You can tell because Sonic is on the cover, asking you to flip the comic on its side.
Yeah, they decided to write the first story sideways, which I'm neutral towards, I guess.
Oh, that was a weird idea.
I don't know, it's fine.
I actually,
It doesn't really make much
comic,
difference.
this comic was not originally part of a super special, is what it is. It was originally printed in some other publication, and it was a lengthwise book, so that's why these are printed sideways.
Interesting.
Okay. That thank
explains
you
a
for that
lot.
context, because that saves me. I'm still gonna do it, but saves me, I guess, from going quite as much in depth into the continuity nightmare that is this story.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that was confused.
Yes, this story is Turnabout Heroes, a combination story written by Ken Penders and Carl Ballers and drawn by James Fry, wherein Sonic and Knuckles awake one morning to find themselves inhabiting each other's bodies, with Dimitri and what appears to be a resurrected Dr. Robotnik attacking Angel Island. The two have to team up to stop the Chaos Cannon, which roboticizes anything it aims at, and restore their original bodies, and we can already see how this doesn't make any sense within canon.
I'll save the bulk of my comments for the end, but yes, it's pretty evident, even starting off.
That's probably why it recaps all the Sonic and Knuckles crap, is because if this was not in a regular Archie comic, you would actually need a refresher.
Right.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that makes sense. I thought it was just, kind of a stylistic way of being like, I am Sonic the Hedgehog, but then I'm actually Knuckles, and then I'm Knuckles the Echidna, but then I'm actually Sonic. But you're right, It has a double purpose. So, yeah, they do that. There's really nothing there. It's just recovering things, setting the scene. But then, then you have, yes, Dr. Robotnik here for some reason. And Dimitri. Let me just say, maybe this is just me, I can't see these two teaming up ever.
No. I completely agree.
Ken repeatedly makes comments about how, Dimitri would destroy Robotnik if he had the chance.
I mean, that's not the reason I would give. I just think their personalities would be at each other immediately.
Well, because they have two similar goals.
Yeah, and they get along, like, perfectly, pretty much, I think. There's maybe, like, one bit where Dimitri's like, why don't we just kill him? But quickly Robotic is like, oh, it's because it's more fun. He's like, okay.
Yeah, that's not a thing that Dimitri would go along with.
Right.
I mean, have you seen this guy? He actually would draw out the humiliation of his enemies.
Well, if it was just Knuckles, yes, but the others, I don't think so.
Yeah, no,
he doesn't care.
He doesn't care at all about Sonic or the rest, and he's too prideful, I think, to ally himself with Robotnik. The thing is, and this never gets explained, how these two even formed an alliance.
Yeah, when did they meet? I mean, obviously it can't work in the timeline because Sonic's got his modern design, and plenty of other things probably are in the way. Nate Morgan's here. They've got the new jet, but
So yeah, let's not dwell on that too much because I'm gonna bring up the bulk of my points later. But that's the scene. So and yeah, then back to our heroes. Sonic, or in Knuckles' body, is there with everyone, and they take the Freedom Fighter Special, which is a ship now, I guess, with that name. It's a strange name.
Where did it
Uh,
come from?
they got it.
Okay.
There's no explanation.
Okay. Well, I figured it was worth asking.
This thing does keep appearing, so somehow parts of this must be canon. This thing is actually from the Return of the King special, which I totally forgot about, which shows both how unevenly these comics are written and saves us from having to consider this one canon.
and then the Dark Legion shows up, which does, I guess, make sense because Dimitri is around.
Yeah.
I like this
Um,
panel where Knuckles tries to glide in Sonic's body, but he can't do it because he doesn't have the dreads for it.
So that is funny, and it made me think, oh, okay, so we're gonna have a bit where like Sonic and Knuckles can't use each other's bodies easily, and so I bet they'll like coach each other, and it'll be a cool moment, like in the middle of the fight, things will get like really bad, and they're like, wait, you just gotta do this, that, and then they'll pull it all together at the last second. But unfortunately, that dream does not become reality because Knuckles easily runs at top speed to save Julie. Like, no, nuh-uh.
Yeah, he should trip over his own feet. Or they should have like Sonic learn to glide for something.
Yeah,
No, because
yeah.
that would be interesting.
But instead, there's that one moment where Knuckles struggles, you mentioned, which is funny. But then after that, they have no problem doing anything.
Right.
It reminds me of the Deke Legend of Zelda cartoon where they have an episode where Link and Zelda switch bodies. And
Oh, man,
Link has to teach Zelda how to use all his stuff, but it doesn't make sense because Zelda does all of the work in that show anyway.
Man, that's just a show in general I haven't thought about in a long time.
And it's a show we'll never have to think about again, unless we pivot this show to be talking about Zelda content, which I wouldn't necessarily mind.
That's an interesting idea.
Well, let's get through Sonic first.
But Sonic, yes. So, yeah, so Sonic and Knuckles are easily fighting with all the Freedom Fighters and Julie against the Dark Legion and SWAT bots. And then Robotnik does his signature thing where he's like, hey, idiots, it's me. And Dimitri's there too. And, so they're like, you gotta help us or you'll be stuck in your bodies. And that I feel like they wouldn't go for that. I mean, maybe they're just playing along just so they can trick them later, which they do. But that doesn't seem, I mean, sure, they wouldn't want to be stuck in their bodies, but they're asking for the Master Emerald, which they do actually call it the Master Chaos Emerald, so that's neat.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense because it's just not a big threat. It's like cursing someone to be left-handed or else they have to give you all their money. Like, you can deal with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I do consider it fairly significant. That isn't great, but I don't think it's big enough that they would help Robotnik and Dimitri get the Steel Chaos Emerald. Certainly, Knuckles would never do that.
That's
like
very
Knuckles'
true.
whole stick.
Right.
Yeah, and yeah, they have the Chaos Cannon, which is gonna roboticize everything, I guess.
Yeah, it's funny though because Robotnik is like, "Gadzooks! They really did it!" Like he's surprised that they actually brought in the Master Emerald.
Yeah, he didn't think it would work.
That's actually kind of funny. I like that.
It makes me wonder what his plan was for when they didn't do that.
Well, yeah, like if this was the whole plan, like what was it? What was his backup idea? His actual plan, if he expected that, I don't know. But that's pretty on brand for Robotnik. Not so much for Dimitri, but I can't keep saying that.
And what's hilarious is that, we were talking about how, this episode of Sat AM has the power rock or whatever it's called, and Tails is like, oh, what if we hand him a fake one? And here, they do the SA2 Gambit again, where they hand him a fake emerald, and this is the first time it's ever worked, and maybe the only time.
Yeah, because Tails wasn't there to tell him. That's why it works. But yeah, so they do that, and then they go to smash Dimitri and Robotnik, and Dimitri like was actually a hologram, I think. It's not very clear. But Robotnik was actually just a robot, apparently.
Yeah, but
Right.
it's not Eggman, so
Okay, guys,
I.
it's time for my promised details. Okay, so
All right.
given this whole story takes place from Sonic's perspective, as evidenced by the intro, he's like, "Oh, you gotta read it to the side," and Sonic is always standing sideways. I assume that this is a parallel universe that's simply very similar to ours. Maybe one where Robotnik and Dimitri decide to team up. That's different enough to warrant a parallel universe, I guess. However, unfortunately, things can't be that easy because in the off-panel section of this special, it actually says this happened before issue 72. So right before Robotnik showed up, which then raises the question, where did the robotic double of Robotnik come from? I guess it was created by Robotnik? But that's a weird thing to do because it would really take away the luster of the reveal in issue 74. Like, Robotnik put on a whole event.
performance.
It
It
was
was a
like, yeah, it was a
production.
performance. That's the word I was looking for. A whole performance, with the whole Robotnik's life story, all to lure them up to the space station, right? So that would really be lessened if Sonic had just seen a robotic Robotnik recently, and it surprises me then that his reaction was so strong in that issue if he had just seen basically that exact same thing done recently. And it's also weird then that he didn't react very strongly here. I mean, he's like, "Whoa, it's Robotnik," but he doesn't dwell on it for very long. So, given the fact that that doesn't make any sense, I just have to assume that this is a parallel universe, even though the writers say otherwise. They're wrong. They're just wrong.
Yeah,
All
you
right
hit the nail
then.
on the head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and it ends with Sonic and Knuckles arguing about whether hedgehogs or echidnas are cooler, just because we need a little casual race war going on between these.
Jesus.
But of course, this is a special, which means that we have more than one story, and this is, oh boy, this is Zone Wars Giant Robotno. Don't ask. Written by Carl Ballers
Okay.
and once again Dan Slott, with art by James Fry and Nelson Ribeiro, however you say it. And oh boy, Sonic travels to an alternate dimension to fight kaiju versions of his friends, and also there's some other stuff. I didn't write a summary for this one, and I don't know if that's because I forgot this time, or if it's because I really just don't know what the hell to say about this. We start off about a million miles an hour with Gotcha Man versions of the Freedom Fighters.
Yeah. I'm a little disappointed that they weren't Super Sentai versions, but Gotcha Man is cool enough.
What person reading this would even know what Gotcha Man is?
Gotcha Man didn't get popular in the States until I think it's a reboot anime in like the mid 2000s.
And even then, it's not like a big name brand here.
No,
Really?
it's a relatively niche brand. However, it's something I expect not Sonic writers, comic writers to have probably heard of.
I
Yeah.
suppose.
So it's obvious that they weren't thinking about, oh, should we do a crossover with this? Well, it's not a crossover, it's just a parody.
It should be
Or no,
parody
it's
of.
like, oh, but can we? Because that would be funny or whatever. And so they did. Yeah, I can't believe they're still doing this. I did not realize how many of these we're gonna have to go through. I started off and I was just like, oh, I'm so done with this. But then my frown went to a smile because Sonic reacts the exact same way I did by being done with everything. He's like, Sonic, I've had enough of this nonsense. He's not impressed at all. It's amazing.
Mm.
Which is good because Sonic is like, all right, fine. I'll give you something that you can actually cut your teeth on, and take Sonic to a dimension where the Freedom Fighters are all giant kaiju monsters.
This is certainly not an issue exclusive to Sonic, but because they're employing this trope, it becomes an issue in this issue. So, all this nonsense is going on. You got the big kaiju bunny and the rest. But I just can't help but not care at all because it's completely separate from the main plot. At least before, when they were bringing in, well, Evil Sonic. Initially, obviously, Sonic went there, but later he came to Mobius Prime. So then it's like, oh, okay, well, then I actually care about it because it has relevance to the main plot. But here, Sonic is like, hey, go fight these things. So I don't give a single care because it has nothing to do with anything. I mean, I know Sonic will be fine, so there's no stake.
Yeah, and I mean, this is
Yeah.
just Dimension 72. It's not like there's anything unique about this place or its people. It does have humans, and it does have Robotnik as, like, a good guy named Jake Hintober, and it's his fault that there's these kaijus running around. He just made it by mutating them with chaos energy, I guess.
So let's talk about Jay Kintober for a second. So this
Okay.
guy is portrayed like a good guy. It's supposed to be the classic, oh, it's Eggman, but he's good this time. However,
Mhm.
this guy does not come off as good to me at all. This guy actually seems like he's pulled the fast one on the populace. He's been able to run wild and do whatever he wants, and people think he's the good guy because he explains that he did this whole mess. He admits that. He tries to be like, oh, no. I was trying to unlock the power of the Chaos Emerald so that we could power the city or whatever. But you know what he did to try to do that? He's like, ah ha ha. I shall run a test on Knothole Island, as it's called, the floating island of this universe, which was inhabited. What? He just tested like huge explosions on an inhabited island, and yeah, that's totally fine.
You're right. I guess I wasn't thinking that hard when I said it, but yeah, no, he just
Yeah.
did it on some random place, and well, frankly, that that's fairly consistent with how we've seen Overlanders portrayed in this series. But it's usually that if somebody commits crimes against humanity, it's viewed as a bad thing rather than just like,
Sure.
oh, whoops, my bad. He even created a robo-virus, shout out to the IDW Sonic, but he created a
Mm.
robo-virus to stop them, and it got on Bunny and it got on Chuck, and it did nothing. It just made them robots.
My headcanon is Kintober is having a ball. This is all according to plan, and the populace are none the wiser. And the whole reason he's going to stop everything is like, okay, if I let this go on too long, someone's going to catch on.
Or
Um,
I'm going to die.
or I'm going to die. Yeah, that's probably a
Mhm.
good motivation too. So that's the only reason he's playing the hero. And plus, it'll put him on a good note at the end in case there's anyone who's maybe catching on.
Yeah, because
It's
now
just
he's not the scientist who caused this problem, he's the scientist who helped
Right.
stop it.
Exactly.
Exactly. But the weird thing, he is somewhat apprehensive, I'll admit. But I find it weird that Sonic would play along. I guess he does want to help solve it, so that makes sense. But as we'll see later, he never confronts Kintober for any of this.
Yeah.
Mm.
Instead, he gets a giant Robotnik-shaped mecha to fight the monster versions of his friends.
He's still very narcissistic, so supporting my theory.
Right.
Yeah. So we've got giant Rotor, Sally, Knuckles, Amy, and Tails. And I want to point to Tails here because for some reason he's Devilman.
Yes.
He is Devilman.
What is this? What are these references? I don't understand.
They were
'Cause,
just
like,
having
nobody-
too much fun.
Most Americans wouldn't know Devilman at this time either. Maybe the OVA with all the hilarious swear words had come over. But, like, Devilman Crybaby is where, like, I'd say that most people nowadays know.
Also, I'd like to point out that the mech is very clearly Ultraman. Or is the
It
face
is. It's got the head spine, hasn't it?
Yeah.
The
And
blade.
Ultraman is definitely something Americans would know, so that's a good enough reference.
Well, and Ultraman gets big and fights big monsters, so yeah.
Right.
Yeah, this is honestly wild. I have no idea what to make of this.
They were just having too much fun and decided that this is what they wanted to do. And this is what the super specials are these days. It's just the writers get to do madness for
Yeah.
a little while.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, it's funny because Dan Slott is one of the few comics creators post Pender's lawsuit to come out and say, hey, this thing I created for the series, SEGA, you guys can keep using it if you want. And I respect him for that. But on the one hand, if we got more stuff like this, I think it's better in the bin.
I think it's more of the sentiment of him saying that than
Yeah,
him
exactly,
actually expecting that to happen.
Well, because what is this? The final boss is Jules with a giant Chaos Emerald stuck to his chest? What?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
apparently the emerald split in half. Oh, that's a reference I didn't expect all the way back from Triple Trouble. But yeah, and then Jules and Sonic, I think, of this universe got the two halves. But the weird thing is our Sonic is like super hesitant, which on paper makes sense, I suppose. But I feel like Sonic would, given the fact that this is an alternate universe, first of all, which is a big thing. And second of all, this is like a horribly mutated version of their dad. Like, and he's still like, no, I don't want to fight him. And he's like, he has an overdramatic no at the end when he has to kill all mutant Jules.
Well, he tears the Chaos Emerald off, and for some reason that kills him, even though the others don't have it.
I don't know. I guess he became dependent on it or something. I don't know. He does die, but I don't know why. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just this final bit, it's so weird. Just the giant kaiju version of Sonic screaming in agony over his dead father, immediately followed by everyone cheering for our Sonic as he gets a huge ceremony in honor of killing him.
So this is the thing. Yeah. Kintober is like, oh, it was a great day, everyone. Mission accomplished. Woo woo. Which is kind of the point, because Sonic after this is like, dude, Sonic, like, what the heck? Why? Why'd I have to do all that madness?
Yeah,
I'm asking the same thing, and all Sonic says is like, I know how you feel, man, but it's just what you got to do.
yeah, and he also takes off his helmet and reveals that, like, oh, I'm also Sonic, and it's like, well, yeah, what did you fucking expect?
It's supposed to be a big reveal, but I mean, I assumed as much. Oh yeah, I guess I didn't point out before, but here's the real thing. Because Sonic's point earlier when he recruited Sonic was like, oh no, you're the Prime Sonic. You have to save the day in this universe. No one else can do it, which he doesn't really thoroughly explain. I think he's just like, oh, if you don't, then I guess a bunch of people will just die or something, which is ridiculous. Is there seriously no other answer?
There's hundreds of Sonics, thousands,
Yeah.
potentially infinite, hence the multiverse.
But no, you're the Prime Sonic or whatever, as he's mentioned before.
All of this, there's no meaning to this.
Well, I mean, it seems like they're building up something, because they've done this Sonic plot line a little bit, but it's done in the most nonsensical way possible by jumping through parody universes.
Yeah, I have no words for this. Maybe this isn't the ending we want, but it's certainly the ending we deserve.
I feel like I deserve better than this.
Yeah, I feel like we deserve a lot better.
Well, we're going to get better, because this is it for the classic era comics. This is it for the classic era of Sonic. You know, there's some stuff left, and we'll mention that next time, but for right now, we are all gonna go play the rest of Sonic Adventure, I suppose. It has been a wild ride.
Yeah, that's certainly true. They don't seem like these comics don't seem like they're changing anytime soon, and from what I hear, they don't during the immediate next arc either.
No, they do not. But with all that said, that is going to be it for tonight. Thank you all so much for enjoying. If you have any questions, comments, criticism, or feedback, you can reach us at these locations. And if you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share, comment, like, and subscribe to the video. I hope that all of you have a great rest of your night, a great rest of your week. We'll see you next Sunday, and take care.